daughter drugged my tea and committed me to a psychiatric ward for 72 hours because I refused to cancel my vacation to be her free nanny. She stood on my porch and smiled as the police dragged me away, all because she wanted to declare me incompetent so she could seize the $3 million estate I worked my entire life to build. My name is Emma, and my heart is shattered into 1,000 pieces. I gave Chloe everything: private schools, cars, unconditional love, only to discover that, to her, I was just an obstacle between her and a bank account. I had to watch on secret security footage as she plotted my demise with her lover in my own bed. I exposed her lies. I sent my only child to prison to save my own life. I won the legal battle, but I feel like I have lost my soul. At what point does a mother stop forgiving and start fighting back? Does protecting my dignity make me a monster? I am sitting here, rich and free, but I have never felt more empty. Please, I need to know, did I do the right thing? My name is Emma Harrison. I am 65 years old, a retired marketing executive, and, according to the hushed whispers of the Greenwich, Connecticut social circuit, a cold-hearted widow sitting on a mountain of life insurance money. They are not entirely wrong about the money. My late husband, Richard, left me with a sprawling 5-bedroom colonial estate and a portfolio that ensures I never have to worry about the heating bill. As for the cold-hearted part, well, I suppose that depends on who you ask. I stood in the center of my master bedroom, the afternoon sun filtering through the sheer curtains, casting long, golden rectangular shadows across the hardwood floor. My vintage Louis Vuitton suitcase lay open on the bed, a gaping mouth waiting to be fed with silk scarves and cashmere cardigans. I was methodically folding a beige trench coat, smoothing out the invisible wrinkles with the flat of my hand. Tomorrow morning, I was scheduled to board a first-class flight to Tuscany for a 3-week yoga and wine-tasting retreat. It was my reward to myself. After 40 years of climbing the corporate ladder and 5 years of nursing Richard through a long, agonizing battle with cancer, I felt I had earned the right to be selfish. The house was silent. It was the kind of expensive silence you only get in neighborhoods where the driveways are long and the neighbors are distant. I loved this silence. It tasted like freedom. I placed a bottle of expensive perfume into my vanity case, humming a low tune for the first time in decades. My calendar was blank. No board meetings, no doctor's appointments, no obligations, just me, the Italian countryside, and silence. Then the doorbell rang. It was not a polite, inquiring chime. It was a long, aggressive press, followed immediately by 3 sharp raps on the heavy oak door. My stomach tightened. That specific rhythm, urgent, demanding, and utterly lacking in patience, could only belong to one person. I walked down the grand staircase, my hand trailing along the polished banister. Through the frosted glass panels of the front door, I could see a silhouette shifting impatiently from foot to foot. I took a deep breath, composing my face into a mask of maternal patience, and unlocked the door. Chloe stood on my porch. My 26-year-old daughter looked like a hurricane that had just made landfall. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy bun that was supposed to look effortless, but just looked greasy. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a matching gray sweatsuit that I knew cost more than my first car. Yet she wore it with the air of someone who had been sleeping in a dumpster. Standing on either side of her were my grandchildren, Leo, who is 5, and Sophie, who is 3. They looked sticky. Leo was clutching a tablet with a cracked screen. the volume blaring some obnoxious cartoon, and Sophie was wiping her nose on the sleeve of her coat. "Hi, Mom," Chloe said, pushing past me before I could even say hello. She marched into the foyer, dragging a duffel bag that looked like it had been packed in the dark. "Hello to you too, Chloe," I said, closing the door against the crisp autumn breeze. I tightened the belt of my cardigan. I was just packing. My flight is tomorrow morning. Chloe dropped the duffel bag on my pristine marble floor with a heavy thud. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were red-rimmed and devoid of makeup. She looked around the foyer as if inspecting it for dust, her nose wrinkling slightly. "You are always going somewhere, are you not? Must be nice," Chloe muttered, her voice dripping with that familiar blend of envy and resentment. "It is not just somewhere, Chloe. It is the trip I have been planning for 6 months. You knew this. We discussed it at Thanksgiving." I ignored the barb. I had learned long ago that engaging with Chloe when she was in this mood was like wrestling a pig in mud. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. I looked down at my grandchildren. Sophie was already eyeing a crystal vase on the console table with dangerous curiosity. "What brings you here, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Is Mark with you?" Chloe let out a scoff, a harsh sound that echoed in the high ceilings of the entryway. "Mark? Please. He is in Chicago for some stupid conference. Again. And I... Saoyuting Haoling. 2 hash is greater than I just cannot do it." "Mom," she turned to me, her face crumbling into a practiced expression of misery. It was a look I had seen 1,000 times. When she wanted a new car in high school, when she wanted me to pay off her credit card debt in college. And now, whenever reality became too inconvenient, "I am sick, Mom," she whined, pressing a hand to her forehead. "My migraines are back, and the depression. Saoyuting Haoling, too. It is dark. It is really dark right now. I have not slept in 3 days. I feel like I am going to snap." I looked at her closely. I wanted to be sympathetic. I really did. But my eyes, trained by years of reading people in boardrooms, caught the details. Her manicure was fresh, gel tips, impeccable design. There was a faint smell of stale mimosa and expensive perfume clinging to her. Not the scent of a sick woman who had been bedridden. "Chloe, I am sorry you are feeling unwell," I said carefully, keeping my distance. "But I cannot take the kids right now. I told you. I leave for Italy in less than 24 hours. Chloe's expression hardened instantly. The fragile victim vanished, replaced by the entitled accuser. "So what? You are just going to leave me?" she snapped, her voice rising an octave. "Your own daughter is having a mental health crisis, and you care more about drinking wine with a bunch of strangers? That is classic you. Mom, always putting yourself first." She turned to the kids. "Leo, Sophie, go into the living room. Grandma has the big television." "No, Chloe, wait," I protested, stepping forward. But she was already moving toward the door, her movements sharp and quick. She was not sick. She was escaping. "I just need a few days." "Mom, just a few days to reset. Is that too much to ask? You have this huge house, all this money, all this time. Mark is useless. You are the only one who can help me." She opened the door, letting the cold air rush back in. "Chloe, stop," I shouted, losing my composure. "I cannot watch them. I have a car picking me up at 6 in the morning. Then cancel it." She yelled back from the driveway, not even looking at me. She fumbled with her car keys, her desperation palpable. Or take them with you. I do not care if I do not get a break. I am going to do something crazy. Mom, do you want that on your conscience? She jumped into her white Range Rover, the one Mark was struggling to make payments on, and slammed the door. The engine roared to life. I stood in the open doorway, stunned, watching the taillights of her car disappear down the long, winding driveway. The silence of the house was gone, replaced by the blaring sound of the cartoon from the tablet Leo was holding and the soft crash of something breaking in the living room. I turned around slowly. Sophie had knocked over the crystal vase. Water was pooling on the hardwood, soaking into the expensive rug. My heart hammered in my chest, not from affection, but from a rising, suffocating panic. This was not a visit. This was an ambush. And as I looked at the shattered glass on the floor, I had a sinking feeling that this was only the first thing that was going to break. The silence I cherished had been replaced by the sticky, suffocating chaos of unmanaged childhood. It was 8 in the evening, 4 hours after Chloe had abandoned her children on my doorstep, and my living room looked like a war zone. The pristine white wool rug, imported from Morocco, was now stained with crushed orange cracker dust. A half-eaten apple sat turning brown on my velvet armchair. I was on my knees, picking up the last shards of the crystal vase Sophie had knocked over. My knees popped as I stood up, a sharp reminder of my age. I walked to the kitchen, carefully dumping the glass into the trash bin. My hands were trembling slightly, not from frailty, but from a simmering, low-level rage that I was struggling to suppress. I am not a bad grandmother. I love Leo and Sophie, but loving them does not mean I enjoy being their hostage. Grandma, where is the iPad charger? Leo screamed from the living room. He did not ask. He demanded. At 5 years old, he already possessed his mother's tone, that piercing, expectant whine that assumed the world existed solely to service his needs. Please ask nicely. Leo, I called back, my voice tight, and turned the volume down. He ignored me. Of course he did. Why would he listen to me when his mother had never taught him the meaning of the word respect? I walked into the living room and saw Sophie wiping her nose on the curtains. My stomach turned. These were custom drapes, silk blend, installed only 3 months ago. Sophie, no. I rushed over, gently pulling her away. Use a tissue. Honey, she looked up at me with wide, defiant eyes and screamed, no, before running in circles around the coffee table, shrieking with laughter. I sank onto the sofa, burying my face in my hands. My flight to Florence was departing in 10 hours. My bags were packed upstairs. My ticket was non-refundable. I had a choice to make, and it was tearing me apart. If I left, I would be the monster who abandoned her grandchildren. If I stayed, I was the doormat. Again, I pulled out my phone. I had to cancel the car service. I had to cancel the hotel. Thousands of dollars wasted. As I unlocked the screen, my thumb hovered over the airline application. A notification from Instagram popped up at the top of the screen. It was from Ashley, Chloe's best friend from high school. They were inseparable, a toxic duo of gossip and vanity. Ashley, XOXO tagged you in a photo. I frowned. Why would Ashley tag me? I tapped the notification. The image that loaded on my screen made the air leave my lungs. It was not a picture of a sick bed. It was a dimly lit booth at the Sapphire Room. a high-end cocktail lounge downtown known for its overpriced martinis and lax identification checks. In the center of the frame sat Chloe. She looked radiant. Her hair was down, styled in loose, perfect waves. She was wearing a strapless black dress that showed off her gym-honed shoulders. Holding a martini glass high in a toast, her head was thrown back in laughter, her eyes bright and focused. There was no migraine. There was no depression. The caption read, "Girls' Night Out. Free from the drama. #freedom. #mom life." The timestamp. Just now, I stared at the phone until the screen blurred. The heat in my chest expanded, moving up my neck, flushing my cheeks. It was not just anger. It was a profound sense of betrayal. She had looked me in the eye, used her mental health as a weapon, and played on my guilt, all so she could go drink cocktails with her friends. She had weaponized my grandchildren to secure a babysitter. I stood up. The fatigue vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I dialed Chloe's number. It rang 4 times. Then it went to voicemail. I called again immediately, and again. On the 4th try, she picked up. The background noise was deafening, thumping bass and the shrill laughter of women. "What?" Chloe shouted. Her voice was slurred, not from exhaustion, but from alcohol. "I told you I was sleeping." "Mom, why are you calling me? I can hear the music." "Chloe," I said. My voice was deadly calm. I did not shout. I did not scream. I spoke with the icy precision I used to reserve for underperforming employees. There was a pause on the other end. The background noise muffled slightly, as if she was covering the phone or moving to a bathroom. "So you Jing Hao, Ling. 2# is greater than I have the television on." She stammered. "I am trying to distract myself from the pain." "Stop it." I cut her off. "I am looking at Ashley's Instagram post. You are at the Sapphire Room. You are wearing that black dress I bought you for your birthday. You are drinking a vodka martini." Silence stretched between us, heavy and thick. I could hear her breathing. "So what?" She finally snapped, the pretense dropping instantly. "So I went out for 1 drink. Big deal. I needed to get out of the house. You have no idea how hard it is to be a mother." "Mom, you had nannies." "I do everything myself. You have a husband who pays for everything." "Chloe, and you have a mother you treat like a servant." "I am not a servant," I shouted into the phone, losing my cool for a fraction of a second. "Come get your children. Now, I cannot drive. I have had a few drinks. Do you want me to crash and die? Is that what you want?" She was hysterical now, turning the tables, making herself the victim again. "Then call an Uber," I said, "or call Mark. Mark is in Chicago, and I am not coming. I am staying at Ashley's tonight. You are their grandmother. Just deal with it for 1 night." God, you are so selfish. It is always about you and your precious time. Listen to me very clearly. Chloe, I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking hand against the marble kitchen counter. I am canceling my trip to Italy. I am losing $5,000 because of your lie. Good, she scoffed. You have plenty of money. From this moment forward, the bank of Mom is closed. I continued, my voice lowering, and the free labor is over. If you want me to watch my grandchildren in the future, you will ask me in advance. And if you ever dump them on me like this again without my permission, I will charge you. Charge me? She laughed. A cruel, incredulous sound. Are you insane? You are their grandmother. I will charge you $20 an hour. I said firmly, "That is the market rate for a teenage babysitter. If you want a professional, it is 30. You will pay me for every hour they are here, starting now. Or you can hire a stranger. Those are your options. You are a monster," she hissed. A greedy, pathetic old woman. No wonder Dad died. He probably wanted to get away from you. The words hit me like a physical slap. The room seemed to spin. She knew exactly where to strike to draw the most blood. Tears pricked my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. $20 an hour. "Chloe," I repeated, my voice trembling but resolute. "I will send you the invoice." I hung up the phone before she could say another word. My hand was shaking so badly I nearly dropped the device. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, surrounded by the mess, the noise of the cartoon blaring from the other room, and the echoing silence of a relationship that had just fractured beyond repair. I looked at the clock. It was 9 o'clock. The meter was running, but as I looked at the dark reflection in the window, I knew the cost was going to be much higher than $20 an hour. Chloe arrived at 10 o'clock the following morning. The sun was shining with an almost mocking brightness, illuminating the dust motes, dancing in the foyer where I had spent the last 12 hours, cleaning up sticky juice stains and organizing scattered toys. I had not slept. My suitcase was still sitting by the door. A silent monument to the vacation I was supposed to be taking at that very moment. Instead of sipping Chianti in a Tuscan vineyard, I was standing in my hallway, holding a sealed envelope. When the door opened, the smell hit me first. It was the stale, sour scent of vodka, sweating out through pores, masked poorly by an overdose of floral body spray. Chloe looked less like a runway model today and more like a train wreck in oversized sunglasses. She did not look at me. She did not apologize. She simply clapped her hands and whistled for the children as if she were calling dogs. "Leo, Sophie, Mommy is here. Let us go. We are going to get Happy Meals," she announced, her voice rasping slightly. The children thundered down the stairs, screaming with delight. Oblivious to the tension that made the air between their mother and grandmother thick enough to choke on, they scrambled out the door without a backward glance. I felt a pang of sorrow in my chest. I was merely a holding cell to them, a place to exist until the fun parent returned with promises of grease and sugar. Chloe turned to leave, her hand already on the doorknob. "Chloe, wait," I said. My voice was low, devoid of warmth. She paused, her back to me, her shoulders stiffening. "What now?" "Mom, I am taking them off your hands. Is that not what you wanted? You can go back to counting your money or whatever you do all day." I extended the envelope toward her. "You forgot this." She turned slowly, her eyebrows knitting together in confusion as she looked at the white paper in my hand. "What is that?" "The invoice," I said. She stared at me. For a moment, the only sound was the idling engine of her Range Rover outside and the distant chirping of a robin. Then, she let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You are joking." I stared back, my face impassive. I never joke about money. "Chloe, you know that 14 hours of childcare, 2 children, plus a cleaning fee for the rug Sophie ruined and the vase she broke. I rounded it down to $300. She snatched the envelope from my hand, crumpled it into a ball, and threw it on the floor. "You are sick," she spat, her face twisting into an ugly sneer. "You are actually sick. Most grandmothers would kill to spend time with their grandkids. You send a bill? You are going to regret this. Mom, you are going to die alone in this big, empty mausoleum, and nobody is going to care." She slammed the door so hard, the glass panes rattled in their frames. I stood there for a long time, looking at the crumpled ball of paper on the floor. I did not pick it up. I knew she would not pay it. The money was never the point. It was about boundaries. But as I watched her car speed away, kicking up gravel, I realized that boundaries mean nothing to people who do not believe you have the right to exist separately from them. 3 days passed. The silence returned to the house, but it felt different now. It felt heavy. I tried to reschedule my trip, but the travel agent told me the retreat was fully booked for the rest of the season. I spent my days gardening, aggressively pruning the rose bushes, trying to work out the knot of anxiety that had settled permanently in my stomach. On Wednesday morning, I went to the local organic market. It was a place where I usually spent 45 minutes chatting with neighbors and acquaintances. We would discuss the upcoming charity gala or the new yoga studio on Main Street. But today, the atmosphere was frigid. I pushed my cart down the produce aisle and saw Brenda, the president of our homeowners association. Brenda was a woman who thrived on information. She knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. Usually, she would rush over to compliment my scarf. "Hello, Brenda," I said, forcing a smile. Brenda looked up from a stack of organic lemons. Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. She did not smile. She did not say hello. She simply turned her cart around and walked in the opposite direction, whispering something to the woman standing next to her. I froze. My hand hovered over a basket of strawberries. The back of my neck prickled. I looked around and noticed other glances, side-eyed looks, hushed whispers behind cupped hands. I was being shunned. In our tight-knit, wealthy community, social death was often more painful than physical death. I abandoned my cart in the middle of the aisle. I walked out to my car, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My hands shook as I pulled my iPad out of my purse. I did not have Facebook on my phone. I found it too cluttered, but I knew exactly where to look. I navigated to the official community page for our neighborhood. It was usually reserved for complaints about unkempt lawns or lost dogs. Today, the top post, pinned by the moderator, had over 200 comments. It was posted by Chloe Harrison. The headline read, "The heartbreaking reality of toxic families. Please protect your children." Below the caption was an audio file. My thumb hovered over the play button. I felt a wave of nausea, a primal warning that I was about to hear something terrible. I pressed play. The audio was grainy, clearly recorded from a phone call. Chloe's voice, sobbing. "I just need help. Mom, I am sick. The depression is so dark right now. I feel like I am going to snap." My voice, loud and harsh. "I do not care. I am going to Europe." Chloe's voice, "Please, Mom, just for a few days. I am begging you." My voice, "If you want me to watch them, pay me $20 an hour or hire a stranger." Chloe's voice, "But they are your grandchildren." My voice, "I will send you the invoice." The recording ended. I sat in the driver's seat of my Mercedes, gasping for air as if I had been punched in the gut. It was a masterpiece of editing. She had cut out the part about the bar. She had cut out the background music. She had cut out my questions about Mark. She had removed every ounce of context, leaving only her sobbing pleas and my cold, transactional demands. She had made me sound like a monster who demanded cash to save her suicidal daughter. I scrolled down to the comments. Brenda Miller, "This is absolutely disgusting. I always knew Emma was cold, but this is evil." User 123, This is elder abuse in reverse. She is financially abusing her own daughter. Shame on her. Sarah Jenkins. My heart breaks for you. Chloe, you are such a good mom. Keep those babies away from that woman. Mark Wilson, Chloe's husband. I am so sorry. I was not there to protect you. Honey, we will handle this. I dropped the iPad onto the passenger seat. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that I could not even cry. My own daughter had not just lied. She had meticulously constructed a weapon to destroy my character. She knew that in this town, reputation was currency, and she had just bankrupted me. I drove home in a daze. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different. It no longer looked like a sanctuary. It looked like a fortress that had been breached. If she was willing to do this publicly, what would she do privately? If she was willing to destroy my reputation to cover up a night of drinking, what would she do if she wanted something more substantial, like my money or my house? I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady now. The shock had burned off, leaving behind a cold, hard resolve. I was not going to comment on the post. I was not going to call Brenda and explain. I was not going to beg Mark to listen to the truth. They had already made up their minds. I was done playing defense. I picked up the landline and dialed a number I had saved years ago. Back when Richard was worried about burglars, it was a private security firm. Discreet and expensive. I need a technician, I said when the receptionist answered. Today, it is an emergency. 3 hours later, a man in a gray jumpsuit was standing in my bedroom. I want them invisible, I told him, pointing to the bookshelf that faced my bed. And I want one in the living room. Hidden in the smoke detector, he nodded. A professional who asked no questions. We can set up a cloud server. Mrs. Harrison. Accessible only by you. Audio and video. High definition. Night vision. Do it, I said as he worked, drilling tiny holes and wiring the devices. I sat in the corner of the room, watching. I felt a strange sense of detachment. A mother should not have to bug her own house to protect herself from her child. It was a tragedy. It was a violation of the natural order. But as I thought about the audio recording, about the comments, about the sheer malice in Chloe's eyes when she threw that invoice on the floor, I knew I had no choice. The little girl I had raised, the one I had read bedtime stories to, was gone. In her place was a stranger, a hungry, desperate stranger who felt the world owed her everything. By 5 o'clock, the cameras were live. I opened the application on my phone. The image was crisp and clear. I could see my empty bed. I could see the empty living room. I was watching my own life through a lens, waiting for the actors to take the stage. I did not know when they would come back, or what they would do when they did. But next time, there would be no edited audio. Next time, there would be no lies. Next time, the world would see exactly what I was seeing. I closed the application and looked out the window at the setting sun. The sky was a bruised purple, beautiful and ominous. Let them come, I whispered to the empty room. I am ready. 2 weeks of icy silence followed the Facebook incident. I did not leave the house. I ordered my groceries online, leaving instructions for the delivery driver to leave the bags at the gate. I spent my days in the garden, aggressively weeding the flower beds until my hands were raw and blistered. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from the humiliation that burned in my chest every time I thought about my neighbors whispering my name. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was as soft as a didn't chime. I checked the monitor in the kitchen. It was Chloe, but she did not look like the vengeful demon who had stormed out of my driveway a fortnight ago. She was wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and she wore no makeup. She held a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite, clutched nervously against her chest. I debated not opening the door. I knew I should not open the door. The security technician's voice echoed in my head. You are watching a stranger. But then she looked up at the camera, and I saw her wipe a tear from her cheek. It was a gesture so reminiscent of when she was 6 years old and had scraped her knee that my resolve crumbled. I am a businesswoman. Yes, but I am a mother first. That is the fatal flaw in my design. I opened the door. Hi, Mom, she whispered, her voice trembling. I stood firm in the doorway, blocking her path. Hello, Chloe. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than I brought these for you. She held out the flowers. I know I cannot fix what I did. I know that I was awful. I was drunk, and I was angry. And Mark and I were fighting, and I just... Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hash is greater than I took it out on you. I am so sorry. Mom, I deleted the post. I told everyone I was having a breakdown. Please, I just want my mom back. She began to weep, her shoulders shaking. It was a performance, perhaps, but it was a damn good one. And in that moment, the silence of the big empty house felt too loud to bear. Come in, I said, stepping aside. That was the beginning of the thaw, or rather, the infiltration. Over the next 10 days, Chloe became the daughter I had always dreamed of. She visited every morning after dropping Leo and Sophie at school. She did not ask for money. She did not ask for babysitting. She simply came to be with me. We sat in the sunroom, drinking tea and talking about inconsequential things. She seemed attentive, asking about my garden, my book club, and my health. You look tired. Mom, she said one morning, her brow furrowed in concern. She was standing at the kitchen island, brewing a fresh pot of herbal tea. Are you sleeping okay? Not really, I admitted, rubbing my temples. I have had this headache for 3 days, and I feel... Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. Ketu. Fog. It is probably stress, she said soothingly, placing a steaming mug in front of me. Here, it is a new blend I found. Chamomile and valerian root. It will help you relax. I took a sip. It was bitter, with a strange, metallic aftertaste that lingered on the back of my tongue. It tastes a bit off, I noted. It is the valerian, she said quickly, turning her back to rinse a spoon in the sink. It is an acquired taste, but it works wonders. Trust me. I trusted her. I drank the tea. By the end of the week, the fog in my brain had thickened into a dense, impenetrable smog. I would wake up in the morning feeling heavier than when I went to sleep. My limbs felt like they were filled with wet sand. Simple tasks became monumental efforts. I would walk into a room and forget why I was there. I would lose my train of thought in the middle of a sentence, staring blankly at the wall while Chloe watched me with eyes that seemed to gleam with a predatory patience. One afternoon, I was searching for my car keys. I had placed them in the crystal bowl by the door, just as I had done every day for 30 years. But the bowl was empty. Chloe? I called out, panic rising in my throat. Have you seen my keys? She walked in from the living room, holding a magazine. Mom, you are holding them. I looked down. My hand was empty. No, I am not. She pointed to the kitchen counter, near the refrigerator. No, over there. You put them in the fruit basket. I saw you do it 5 minutes ago. I walked over to the fruit basket. Nestled between 2 bananas were my keys. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I had no memory of walking to the fruit basket. None. It was a blank space in the tape of my life. Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash, is greater than I do not remember doing that. I whispered, Chloe Sahed, a sound filled with exaggerated pity. You have been doing that a lot lately. Mom, yesterday you put the milk in the pantry, and you called me Susan twice. Susan is your sister. Mom, she has been dead for 10 years. I gripped the cold granite of the counter to steady myself. Did I? I felt the blood drain from my face. My mother had died of Alzheimer's. It had started just like this. Small lapses, misplaced objects, names slipping away like sand through fingers. Was it happening to me? Was my mind rotting from the inside out? Maybe you should see a doctor, Chloe suggested softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt heavy. Mark knows a specialist. We can take care of everything. No, I snapped, pulling away. I am fine. I am just tired, but I was not fine. The symptoms worsened. My hands began to tremble so violently I could barely sign my name on a check. I started seeing things in my peripheral vision, shadows moving, figures that vanished when I turned my head. I felt paranoid, constantly watched. Even when I was alone, I tried to check the security cameras I had installed. I wanted to see if I really had put the milk in the pantry. I sat at my desk, my fingers hovering over the mouse, but my vision blurred. The screen seemed to swim before my eyes. A wave of dizziness hit me so hard I had to put my head down on the desk. Mom? Chloe's voice came from the doorway. I yerked up, heart racing. How long had she been there? What are you doing? She asked, her eyes darting to the computer screen. Nothing, I mumbled, quickly closing the laptop. Just checking emails. You should rest, she said, her voice dropping to a command wrapped in velvet. I made you more tea. She placed the cup on the desk. The steam rose in curling ribbons. I looked at the liquid, dark and murky. A voice in the back of my head, a tiny, survivalist whisper, told me not to drink it. It told me that the fog started after the tea started. It told me that Chloe was too present, too helpful, too observant. But then I looked at my trembling hands. I looked at the calendar on the wall and realized I did not know what day of the week it was. I was 65 years old. My mind was failing. I was becoming the very thing I feared most. A burden. Maybe she is right, I thought. Despair washing over me. Maybe I am losing it. Thank you, sweetie, I said, my voice sounding weak and foreign to my own ears. I lifted the cup to my lips. Chloe smiled. It was a small, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. She stood there and watched me swallow the poison, waiting for the woman I used to be to disappear completely. The Saturday afternoon sun should have been comforting, but through the lens of my drugged consciousness, it looked like blinding white fire. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, ostensibly watching Leo and Sophie while Chloe ran a quick errand to the pharmacy. That was the excuse. At least, in reality, my body felt like it was made of lead, anchored to the velvet cushion by a gravity that seemed to have doubled in strength. The tea Chloe had prepared for me an hour ago sat empty on the coaster. The metallic taste lingered on my tongue, coating my mouth with a film of chemical bitterness. Grandma? Look at me, Leo shouted. I tried to turn my head. The motion left a trail of visual echoes, like a stutter in a film reel. The room was breathing. The walls expanded and contracted in a slow, rhythmic pulse. I am looking. Leo, I tried to say, but the words came out thick and slurry, like I had a mouthful of cotton balls. Sophie was playing near the fireplace. She was building a tower out of wooden blocks on the marble hearth. To my distorted vision, the marble began to liquefy. It looked like gray water, swirling and rising. Get away, I whispered, lifting a hand that felt unconnected to my body. Sophie, move. The shadows in the corner of the room lengthened. They detached themselves from the wall and began to slither across the floor. They looked like ink, dark and viscous, moving toward the child. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Panic, raw and primal, flooded my system, overriding the lethargy of the drugs. Snakes, I gasped. I stood up. The floor pitched violently to the left. I stumbled, knocking over the side table. The lamp crashed to the floor, the bulb shattering with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. Sophie looked up, her eyes wide with terror. Sao Yu Jinghaoling, 2 hash is greater than Grandma? Move, I screamed, lunging forward to save her from the encroaching shadows. I reached for her, intending to pull her away from the imaginary danger, but my depth perception was gone. Instead of grabbing her arm, my hand struck her shoulder hard. The force of my clumsy lunge sent her toppling backward. Her head hit the sharp edge of the coffee table with a sickening thud. For a second, there was absolute silence. Then, Sophie began to scream. It was a high, piercing shriek that cut through the fog in my brain like a knife. Blood began to trickle from a cut above her eyebrow, bright red against her pale skin. I fell to my knees, the room spinning wildly. Oh God, I moaned, reaching for her. Sophie, I am so sorry. I thought, Sao Yu Jinghaoling, 2 hash is greater than I thought. Sao Yu Jinghaoling, R Jinghao Dayu. The front door burst open. The sound of footsteps was thunderous. Chloe and Mark rushed into the room. They stopped dead. The scene before them was damning. A shattered lamp, a screaming, bleeding child, and an old woman on her knees, mumbling incoherently, looking wild-eyed and disheveled. What did you do? Chloe screamed. Her voice was not fearful. It was triumphant. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. She rushed to Sophie, scooping her up. Mark stood frozen, staring at me with horror. She, Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than she pushed me. Sophie sobbed, burying her face in Chloe's neck. Grandma pushed me. I did not. Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than the shadows. Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than I tried to explain. But my tongue would not cooperate. You are drunk, Chloe yelled at me, her face twisted in fake outrage. You are drunk in the middle of the day while watching my children. No. Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, Doi, Ti. Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than you gave me. Sao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than I slurred, trying to point at the cup. Mark, look at her. Chloe turned to her husband. She cannot even stand up. She is completely wasted. She could have killed Sophie. Mark looked at me, his eyes full of disappointment and disgust. Emma, how could you? Chloe did not wait for an answer. She pulled her phone from her pocket. Her fingers moved with practiced speed. I am calling 911, she announced. And then I am calling Adult Protective Services. This ends today. No, I pleaded, trying to stand up, but my legs gave way, and I slumped back onto the rug. Please. 邵玉静号令. 2. Mark. 邵玉静号令. 2 Raute ist größer als Listen. 邵玉静号令. R. 静号大雨. Hello? Chloe spoke into the phone, her voice shifting instantly into a frantic, terrified soprano. I need an ambulance and police at 12 Oakwood Drive immediately. My mother is having a psychotic break. She has attacked my 3-year-old daughter. She is violent and out of control. Please hurry. She hung up and looked at me. For one brief second, while Mark was tending to Sophie's cut, the mask dropped. Chloe looked at me with cold, dead eyes. Her lips curved into a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk. You should have just been a free nanny. Mom, she mouthed silently. 10 minutes later, the room was filled with uniformed strangers. A paramedic shone a light into my eyes. Pupils are blown, he said to his partner. Possible overdose. Or a stroke? She has dementia, Chloe interjected, sobbing theatrically into Mark's shoulder. She has been getting worse for weeks. She gets violent. She thinks people are stealing from her. I tried to help her, but she refused to see a doctor. I am not. 邵玉静号令. 2. Crazy. 邵玉静号令. 2 hash is greater than I whispered, tears streaming down my face. She. 邵玉静号令. 2 hash is greater than drugged me. Of course. Mrs. Harrison, the paramedic said patronizingly. Just relax. We are going to take you somewhere safe. They strapped me to a gurney. The restraints cut into my wrists. I felt like an animal being trussed for slaughter as they wheeled me out of the house I had built, the house I had paid for. I saw my neighbors standing on their lawns, watching. I saw Brenda shaking her head. I looked back at the front porch. Chloe stood there, holding Sophie. She waved at me. It was a small, mocking wave. Mark, I called out, summoning the last of my strength. Check. 邵玉静号令. 2 hash is greater than the cameras. But Mark was not listening. He was signing a paper the police officer had handed him. We are taking her to St. Jude's for a 72-hour psychiatric hold. The officer said, based on the injury to the child and her current state, she is a danger to herself and others. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sealing me in with the smell of antiseptic and my own terror. The siren wailed, announcing my downfall to the entire neighborhood. I closed my eyes as the vehicle lurched forward. I had lost. Chloe had played the long game, and she had won. I was no longer Emma Harrison, the respected businesswoman. I was a senile, violent old woman who hurt children. But as the darkness of the drugs finally dragged me under, one thought anchored me, a single burning ember in the ash of my life. The cameras. She did not know about the cameras. The transition from the world of the living to the world of the forgotten was not marked by a gate or a tunnel, but by the heavy, hydraulic hiss of a locking door. I woke up in a room that smelled of bleach and despair. It was a sterila, windowless box painted a shade of beige that seemed designed to drain the human spirit. There was no clock on the wall. The only furniture was a bed bolted to the floor and a steel toilet in the corner. I was wearing a paper gown that scratched my skin, and my wrists were bruised where the restraints had been. I tried to sit up, but my head swam with a nauseating vertigo. The drugs were still in my system, a chemical fog that made my thoughts sluggish and disjointed. I looked at my arm. A plastic bracelet was snapped around my wrist. It did not have my name. It had a barcode and a number, 72 hours. That was what the officer had said. But in a place like this, time did not move in hours. It moved in heartbeats, in the rhythmic screaming of a patient down the hall, in the flickering hum of the fluorescent light overhead. The door opened with a metallic clank. A man in a white coat walked in, holding a clipboard. He looked exhausted, his eyes scanning the paper rather than my face. This was Dr. Eris, the psychiatrist assigned to decide my fate. "Mrs. Harrison," he said, his voice flat. "I see you are awake. How are we feeling?" "I am not crazy," I rasped. My throat felt like it was filled with broken glass. "You have to listen to me. My daughter drugged me." Dr. Eris Sihil, a sound of practiced patience. He did not look up from his clipboard. He made a small tick mark next to a line of text. "Paranoid delusions," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Your daughter told us you might say that. She mentioned you have been accusing family members of poisoning you for weeks." "She is lying," I said, my voice rising in panic. "She wants my money. She wants my house. You have to test my blood. Test it for sedatives. We did run a tox screen." "Mrs. Harrison," he said, finally looking at me over the rim of his glasses, "we found high levels of benzodiazepines." "See," I cried out, a surge of hope flooding my chest. "I told you, I never take those. Your daughter provided us with your prescription bottle." He interrupted, his voice stern. "She said you have been abusing your sleeping medication. She found the bottle in your bedside drawer. Empty." My mouth fell open. The air left my lungs. The thoroughness of her plan was terrifying. She had planted the bottle. She had thought of everything. "I do not have a prescription for benzodiazepines," I whispered, the fight draining out of me. The doctor shook his head, looking at me with a mixture of pity and professional detachment. "Denial is a common symptom. Emma, you are 65. You have undergone significant stress. Your family is very worried about you. Your daughter was in tears in the waiting room. She wants what is best for you." He turned to leave. "Wait," I begged, reaching out. "Please, just call my lawyer, Robert Sterling. Please, we will discuss legal representation once you are stabilized," he said, signaling for the nurse to enter. "Right now, you need rest." The nurse, a large woman with forearms like tree trunks, approached with a syringe. I tried to pull away, but my limbs were too heavy. I felt the sharp prick of the needle, and then the cold rush of fluid entering my vein. "No, Sao Ting Haling. 2# is greater than," I moaned, my eyelids drooping. "The cameras. Sao Ting Hao Ling. 2# is greater than, check the cameras. Sao Ting Haling. R Ting Hao Dayu." Dr. Eris paused at the door. "Hallucinations regarding surveillance." He noted to the nurse, "Keep her sedated. We do not want her injuring herself again." The door hissed shut, sealing me into the darkness. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was very different. My house, my sanctuary of silence and order, had been commandeered. The heating was cranked up to 75 degrees, a temperature I never allowed because it was wasteful. The television in the living room was blaring a football game. Chloe sat on my Italian leather sofa, her feet resting on the coffee table where her daughter had bled only hours before. She held a glass of my 1982 Bordeaux, a vintage Richard had been saving for our 50th anniversary. She swirled the dark red liquid, watching the legs run down the side of the glass. Standing by the fireplace was Liam. He was a man carved from muscle and arrogance, a personal trainer who had never held a job that required him to wear a tie. He was wearing a tight t-shirt and jeans, looking utterly out of place amidst my antiques. He picked up a bronze statue, weighing it in his hand like a dumbbell. "Nice place," he grunted, placing the statue back down with a careless clatter. "You think the old bat is going to stay locked up?" Chloe took a long sip of the wine, her eyes closing in pleasure. "She will, if we play our cards right." The doctor said she was raving. The more she screams about conspiracies, the crazier she looks. Liam walked over and sat next to her, draping a heavy arm around her shoulders. "And the husband? Is he on board?" "He is soft," Chloe sneered, leaning into him. "Mark does whatever I tell him to do. He is terrified of conflict. I told him Mom is dangerous. I told him she might burn the house down with the kids inside next time." Liam laughed. "A low, cruel sound. You are dangerous, babe." "I am practical," she corrected him, her voice hardening. "She has $3 million in assets." "Liam, $3 million. And she was going to spend it on yoga retreats and charity. She was going to leave us nothing. I am just taking my inheritance a little early. It is owed to me." The front door opened. Liam jumped up, moving away from Chloe with practiced speed. He pulled out his phone and pretended to be scrolling through emails. Mark walked in. He looked haggard. His eyes were red, and his shoulders were slumped under the weight of a guilt he did not yet understand. He held a thick stack of legal documents in his hand. "How is Sophie?" Mark asked, his voice hollow. "She is sleeping," Chloe said, her voice instantly shifting into a soft, maternal register. "She is traumatized." "Mark, she keeps asking why Grandma hurt her." Mark flinched. He walked over to the kitchen island and dropped the papers on the counter. The header on the first page read in bold, black letters, "Petition for emergency conservatorship. I do not know. Chloe." Mark said, rubbing his face, "This feels Xiaoyu Jinghaoling. 2# is greater than extreme. Taking control of her finances, putting her in a long-term facility. She is your mother." Chloe stood up and walked over to him. She placed her hands on his chest, looking up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Do you think I want this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It breaks my heart, Mark. But you saw her. She was drunk. She was violent. The doctor said it is dementia. If we do not take control, she will lose everything. She will give it all away to scammers. Or worse, she will hurt herself. We are doing this to protect her." Mark looked at the papers, then at his wife. He was a good man, but he was weak. He wanted peace. He wanted his wife to stop crying. He wanted the nightmare to end. She said something about cameras. Mark muttered, a frown creasing his forehead. As they were taking her away, "She told me to check the cameras." Chloe's heart skipped a beat, but her face remained a mask of tragic concern. "Honey," she said gently, brushing a stray hair from his forehead, "there are no cameras inside the house. You know that." She was hallucinating. That is part of the sickness. She thinks people are watching her. It is classic paranoia. Mark Seahill. A long, defeated exhale. He picked up the pen. "I just want her to be safe," he said. "Then sign it." Chloe whispered, "For her sake, and for the kids." Mark hesitated for 1 second more. The tip of the pen hovered over the signature line. In that second, the fate of my entire life's work hung in the balance. He pressed the pen to the paper. The scratch of the ink was loud in the quiet kitchen. "Mark Wilson," Chloe watched the ink dry, a savage satisfaction blooming in her chest. With that signature, Emma Harrison ceased to be an independent person. She became a ward, a subject, a ghost in her own life. "Thank you," Chloe whispered, kissing him on the cheek. "You did the right thing." Back in the hospital, night had fallen. The screaming down the hall had stopped, replaced by a heavy, medicated silence. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The drugs dragged at my consciousness, trying to pull me into a dreamless sleep, but a cold kernel of fear kept me awake. I had built a fortress. I had accumulated wealth. I had demanded respect. But in the end, none of it mattered. All it took was one accusation, one lie, and the signature of a doctor who was too tired to care. I thought about Chloe. I thought about the little girl who used to hold my hand when we crossed the street. I tried to find that girl in my memory, but all I could see was the woman standing on the porch, waving that small, mocking wave. She had won. She had taken my home. She had taken my freedom. And soon, she would take my dignity. I turned on my side, pulling the thin, scratchy blanket up to my chin. A single tear leaked from my eye, tracking a hot path across my temple and into my hair. "I'm going to die in here," I thought, the realization settling over me like a shroud. But then, in the silence, a sound echoed in my memory. It was the technician's voice. "Cloud server, accessible only by you." They had the house, they had the doctors, they had the legal papers, but they did not have the password. I closed my eyes. I recited the password in my head, over and over again, like a prayer. It was a string of numbers and letters, a lifeline thrown into the abyss. If I could just get out, if I could just get to a phone, if I could just survive this. The tragedy was complete. The mother was fallen, the daughter was ascendant. But as long as I had breath in my lungs and a secret in my mind, the story was not over. 72 hours is an eternity when you are trapped in a beige box with nothing but your own terror for company. But it is also a deadline. On the morning of the 4th day, the metallic clink of the lock sounded different. It was sharper, more final. The door swung open, revealing Dr. Eris and a woman in a sharp navy suit whom I had never seen before. She held a briefcase, not a clipboard. "Mrs. Harrison," Dr. Eris said, avoiding my eyes. "This is a representative from the court." The woman stepped forward. Her name was Miss Gable, and she smelled of cheap coffee and bureaucracy. "Mrs. Harrison," she began, her voice devoid of emotion. "A petition for emergency conservatorship has been filed by your daughter, Chloe Wilson, and supported by your son-in-law. Given the medical report indicating severe dementia and the incident involving your grandchild, the judge has granted temporary custody of your person and estate to Mrs. Wilson." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "You cannot do this," I whispered, sitting up in the bed. "I am sane. I demand a hearing. The hearing is scheduled for Friday." Miss Gable continued, ignoring my outburst. "Until then, you are to be transferred to a secure, assisted living facility chosen by your conservator, chosen by Chloe." A chill went down my spine. I knew what kind of place Chloe would choose. It would be the cheapest one she could find, a warehouse for the dying where I would be medicated into oblivion so she could drain my accounts without interference. Dr. Eris cleared his throat. "However," he said, looking uncomfortable, "your personal attorney, Mr. Sterling, has filed an injunction. He is waiting in the consultation room. My heart leaped. Robert. He had come. They led me down the hallway, my paper slippers shuffling on the linoleum. We entered a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Robert Sterling sat there. He was an old lion of a man, with white hair and a suit that cost more than Dr. Eris made in a year. When he saw me, disheveled, bruised, wearing a hospital gown, his jaw tightened. "Emma," he said softly, standing up. "My God, Robert," I gasped, falling into the chair opposite him. "You have to get me out of here. They are trying to bury me." "I know," he said, his voice grim. "I saw the filing. Chloe is moving fast. She has affidavits from neighbors. Medical reports from this Saoyuting Haoling. 2# is greater than facility. Saoyuting Haoling. 2# is greater than claiming you are incompetent. It does not look good. Emma, the judge is inclined to side with the family in cases of alleged dementia." He leaned in closer. "Unless we have something concrete, something that proves she is lying." "Without proof. It is just your word against a grieving daughter and a doctor's diagnosis." I looked at the mirror on the wall. It was a 2-way mirror. I knew we were being watched. I leaned across the table, lowering my voice to a whisper. "Robert," I said, my eyes locking onto his. "Do you have your tablet?" He nodded. Confused. "Yes." "Why?" "Open the browser," I commanded, a spark of my old authority returning. "Go to the website for Titan Security." He hesitated, then pulled a sleek tablet from his briefcase. He tapped the screen. "I am there. Log in," I said. "Username, MA_private. He typed it in. "Password?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The key to my salvation. Or my tomb. The password, I whispered, is ungrateful child, 1998. Robert's fingers flew across the screen. He hit enter. A moment of silence passed, stretched thin by tension. Then, his eyes widened. He gasped, a sharp intake of air. "My God," he murmured. On the screen, a grid of live feeds appeared, but it was the archive folder that mattered. "Go to last Saturday," I said, 2 in the afternoon. He scrolled back. He pressed play. We watched in silence. On the small screen, the truth played out in high definition. We saw Chloe pouring the powder into my tea. We saw me drink it. We saw the drug take effect, my movements becoming sluggish. We saw the incident, the shadows, the stumble, the accidental push. But then, we saw what happened after the ambulance left. We saw Chloe and Liam celebrating. We saw them drinking my wine. We saw them having sex in my bed. We saw Chloe laughing as she told Liam how easy it was to trick Mark. Robert looked up at me. His face was pale, but his eyes were blazing with a fierce, predatory light. "This changes everything," he said. Friday morning arrived with a gray, weeping sky. The courtroom was a somber place, filled with the murmurs of lawyers and the rustling of papers. I sat at the defendant's table, wearing a suit Robert had brought for me. I was clean, but I looked frail. The past week had aged me 10 years. Across the aisle, Chloe sat next to Mark. She was dressed in black, a mourning veil of sorts, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She looked like the picture of a heartbroken daughter forced to make a terrible decision. Mark looked ill. He would not meet my eyes. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, banged her gavel. "We are here to hear the petition for conservatorship over Emma Harrison," she announced. "Mr. Wilson, You may proceed. Chloe's lawyer stood up. He painted a tragic picture. He spoke of my decline, my confusion, my violent outburst. He presented the medical report from Dr. Aris. He played the audio recording from Facebook. The edited one. It is with a heavy heart, the lawyer concluded, that we ask the court to protect Mrs. Harrison from herself. Judge Patterson looked at me with pity. Miss Harrison, do you have anything to say? Robert stood up. He adjusted his tie, his movements slow and deliberate. Your Honor, he said, his voice booming in the quiet room. We do not dispute that my client appeared confused and disoriented on the day in question. Chloe let out a small sob. Mark put his arm around her. However, Robert continued, turning to glare at Chloe. We dispute the cause. He walked to the center of the room. We have evidence, Your Honor, that Mrs. Harrison is not suffering from dementia. We have evidence that she was systematically poisoned. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Chloe stopped crying. Her head snapped up. Poisoned? Judge Patterson frowned. That is a serious accusation. Counselor, do you have proof? We do, Robert said. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket. We have video surveillance from inside the home. Chloe froze. I saw the color drain from her face in a single, terrifying instant. She gripped Mark's arm so hard her knuckles turned white. Objection, Chloe's lawyer shouted. This is a surprise ambush. We have not seen this evidence. It was obtained in emergency circumstances to prevent a fraudulent judgment. Your Honor, Robert countered calmly. And it proves not only the poisoning, but a conspiracy to commit fraud and elder abuse. Judge Patterson narrowed her eyes. Play it. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence as the video played. There was Chloe, clear as day, tapping a white powder into my teacup. Chloe on video, just enough to make her loopy. The doctor will think she is senile. Mark let out a strangled sound. He pulled his arm away from Chloe, as if she burned him. Then, the scene shifted. The ambulance had just left. Chloe and Liam were in the living room. Liam on video. You think the husband will buy it? Chloe on video. Mark is a spineless idiot. I just cry a little, and he signs whatever I want. Once the old hag is locked up, we sell the house. $3 million. Baby. The video cut to them kissing. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. It was absolute. Mark stood up. His chair scraped loudly against the floor. He stared at the screen, then at his wife. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. You, Yu Ting Ha Ling, 2 hashes greater than he whispered. You called me an idiot? You, Yu Ting Ha Ling, 2 hashes greater than poisoned your mother? Mark. No, it is fake. It is deep fake, Chloe shrieked, reaching for him. She was frantic now, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. They made it up. Sit down. Mrs. Wilson, the judge barked, but Mark did not sit down. He looked at the man on the screen, the man who was not him, touching his wife in his mother-in-law's house. I want a divorce, Mark said. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the room. I want a divorce, and I want full custody. You are a monster. He walked away from her, crossing the aisle to stand near me. I am sorry. Emma, he choked out, tears streaming down his face. I am so sorry. I looked at him. I saw the pain in his eyes, the total destruction of his world. It is not your fault, Mark, I said softly. She fooled us all. Judge Patterson banged her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. Order, "Order," she shouted. "Bailiff, secure Mrs. Wilson." 2 officers moved toward Chloe. "No, you cannot touch me," Chloe screamed, backing away. "I am the victim here. My mother is crazy. This is all a trick." The officers grabbed her arms. She struggled, kicking and screaming, her carefully constructed persona shattering into a million jagged pieces. "You old witch," she shrieked at me as they dragged her toward the door. "I hope you die. I hope you rot in that house. It should have been mine." The heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off her screams. Robert turned to me and smiled. It was a tired smile, but a victorious one. "It is over, Emma," he said. I looked at the empty spot where my daughter had been sitting. I looked at the screen, now black. "Yes," I whispered, "it is over." But as I looked at Mark, weeping into his hands, and thought about my grandchildren who would now grow up knowing their mother was a criminal, I knew that over was just a word. The legal battle was won, but the war had left scorched earth where a family used to be. The judge cleared her throat, case dismissed against Emma Harrison. She ruled, and I am issuing an immediate warrant for the arrest of Chloe Wilson and Liam. Soy Jing Hao Lin. 2 hash is greater than whatever his last name is. Mr. Sterling, please see that Mrs. Harrison is escorted home immediately. I stood up. My legs were shaky, but I stood tall. I walked out of that courtroom not as a victim, but as a survivor. Yet, as I walked into the sunlight, the air felt cold. I was free. I was rich. I was vindicated. But I was also, for the first time in my life, completely and utterly alone. 6 months have passed since the gavel fell. The seasons have changed, trading the crisp, dying leaves of autumn for the budding, violent green of spring. But I am not there to see the flowers bloom in my old garden. I sold the house on Oakwood Drive 3 weeks after the trial. I sold it for $200,000 under the asking price just to get rid of it quickly. I left the furniture, the curtains, and the memories. I wanted to walk away with nothing but my clothes and my sanity. I now live at the Azure Coast, a luxury retirement community in Florida that costs more per month than most people earn in a year. It does not smell like a nursing home. It smells of sea salt, expensive cologne, and money. My apartment overlooks the ocean, a vast, indifferent expanse of blue that reminds me daily of how small our human dramas truly are. Mark is trying his best. I will give him that. He was awarded full custody of the children, mostly because the alternative was foster care. He works 2 jobs now to pay the rent on a small apartment in a less affluent school district. He looks tired. He looks like a man who has been ground down by the realization that his entire marriage was a lie. I pay for Leo and Sophie's private school tuition and their therapy sessions, but that is where my charity ends. I do not babysit. I do not offer loans. I am a grandmother, not a safety net. As for Chloe, she is currently residing in a state correctional facility 200 miles away. The plea deal was 5 years for attempted poisoning and elder abuse. Liam, the coward, turned state's witness against her to save his own skin. He testified that the whole scheme was her idea, that she had manipulated him just as she had manipulated everyone else. In the end, even her lover was just another transaction. I sat on my balcony this evening, a glass of Pinot Grigio in my hand, watching the sun bleed into the horizon. On the table next to me sat a fresh document, typed on thick, cream-colored paper. It was my new will. Robert had tried to talk me out of the severity of it, but I remained firm. Chloe is disinherited, completely. Her name does not appear anywhere in the document. The bulk of my estate, the millions she was so desperate to steal, will go to the Cancer Research Institute and a local shelter for battered women. There is a trust fund for Leo and Sophie, of course, but there is a catch. They cannot touch a single cent until they turn 25 years old, and if they contest the will, they lose everything. I will not raise another generation of entitled monsters. I will not let history repeat itself. I know what people say about me. I know the other residents here whisper that I am cold. They say a mother should forgive. They say blood is thicker than water. But they do not understand that some blood is toxic. I admit my part in this tragedy. I was not a perfect mother. I was busy. I was distant. I used money to bridge the gaps where affection should have been. I taught Chloe that love was something you bought, not something you earned. I watered the seeds of her greed, and then I acted surprised when the vines grew up to strangle me. I own that sin, but owning a mistake does not mean you have to die for it. My phone buzzed on the glass table, vibrating against the stem of my wine glass. I looked down at the screen. The caller ID displayed a generic number from the Department of Corrections. It was her. It was Tuesday, her loud calling day. I could picture her clearly. She would be wearing a gray jumpsuit, standing in a line of other desperate women, clutching the receiver. She would be ready to cry, ready to apologize, ready to spin a new web of lies about how she has changed, about how she misses me, about how she loves me. She would want money for the commissary. She would want me to hire a better lawyer for her appeal. I stared at the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the biological imperative to answer, to soothe, to fix. But then I remembered the taste of the tea. I remembered the cold floor of the psych ward. I remembered the way she smiled when the police took me away. I picked up the glass of wine and took a slow, deliberate sip. The vintage was exquisite, tasting of oak and dark berries. I reached out and pressed the button on the side of the phone to silence the ringer. Then, with a calm precision, I navigated to the settings and blocked the number. The buzzing stopped. The silence returned, pure and unbroken. I looked out at the ocean, took a deep breath of the salty air, and for the first time in 40 years, I felt completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully free.